Welcome to the Data Scientist Podcast with Dr. Stylianos Kampakis. Dr. Kampakis is a data scientist, statistician, and blockchain expert with a mission to educate the public about the wonderful capabilities of technologies like AI, data science, and DLTs. These technologies have the potential to transform the world, the economy, and our lives. However, there is too much misinformation around tech, and so most people are just confused about what is true and what is not. Whether you are a CEO, an entrepreneur, or just an enthusiast, the Data Scientist Podcast helps you separate reality from hype.
Hi everyone. In this episode, I'm going to talk about a very interesting topic. I recently read an article on MIT Technology Review called "An AI can simulate an economy millions of times to create fairer tax policy." So this is a very interesting article. It talks about some research that was conducted by Salesforce. And what this research was about was creating an artificial economy and then using AI in order to investigate how the AI could come up with optimal tax policies. So for those of you who don't know it, I'm a big fan of computational economics, and I used to do a bit of research many years ago in complexity theory. And in general, economics and the intersection between economics and computer science and AI, it's something which I find fascinating. Yeah, and I believe that in the next few decades, we're going to witness some very big advancements in economics coming from computer science, or from AI. And actually, I think we're already witnessing something like this, right? So things like Bitcoin or Ethereum, they're exactly that. But I believe that eventually governments might also use AI to create new policies. And this research essentially proves that this is possible. I mean, again, it's the early stages, but it's quite fascinating. So what the Salesforce guys did was to create an artificial economy, and then in this economy you have agents which can work and they get resources. And the agents, they have different skills, they can also specialize, and then you end up in a situation much like the real world, where some agents possess more wealth than others. And so the agents are controlled by reinforcement learning, but there's another reinforcement learning agent which represents the government, which sets out the tax policy. And the goal of the government is to maximize productivity while at the same time minimizing taxes. So it essentially tries to create some kind of ideal world. So in the process of doing that, of this interplay between the agents and the government, the researchers in Salesforce discovered all kinds of interesting behaviors. So for example, the agents, in some occasions, they reduce the productivity in order to go down to a lower tax bracket, which would maximize the profit, and then they would increase the productivity again, gaming the system. And then again, the government agent, the government AI policymaker, would change the taxes in response to this. And eventually the AI policymaker came up with some interesting policies, like taxing a lot the rich and the poor, but applying low taxes to the middle class, which actually seem, at least to what they say, seem to be the optimal solution and quite counterintuitive. But given a dynamical system which is constantly shifting, this seemed to be the best solution. And I'm not suggesting that this might be the best solution for all countries in the real world, but the results are very interesting. We've seen, for example, that in AlphaGo, what the expert players were saying was that the algorithm, there were some moments when it made some moves which didn't make any sense. So like the human expert couldn't understand why the algorithm is making this move, but eventually the algorithm ended up winning. And then they were like, aha, so that's why the algorithm made this move. So the algorithm had acquired a superhuman level of performance, and it outperformed the master to an extent that the master couldn't really even understand what the algorithm was doing. But the result eventually justified the option that the algorithm did. And I think we're witnessing something similar here. So if, let's say, we create an improved AI simulation of an economy, if, in a few years, we really have a very granular, accurate simulation of a European or economy or the American economy or, some economy, doesn't matter, and we use these techniques, this method, we might discover that the AI policymaker is making some moves, some decisions which seem counterintuitive, but when we actually apply this in the real world, it works really, really well. So I think this research makes me feel quite optimistic about the future. We see that the AI, can be applied to so many different things, and I really believe it's going to revolutionize economics. Now, are the economists going to listen? Is the government going to listen? I don't think so, at least in the next few years. The reason being that using these methods, using something like reinforcement learning to create new policies, requires a fundamental paradigm shift in the way that policymakers approach policy and taxation. So I don't expect this to come anytime soon, but I believe that sooner or later, could be 10 years, could be 20 years, some governments in some countries will take notice. They will start using methods like this, maybe for some parts of policy making before expanding them. And eventually, when everyone sees that this can lead to huge gains in productivity, in income levels, reductions in inequality, etc., then maybe other countries will follow suit. Then again, politics and economics are complicated games, so there are many different actors involved. So again, there might be agents who do not simply wish to do this, to hand over control to an algorithm. But nevertheless, if you are fascinated by AI, if you really believe in the potential of AI to change the world for the better, I think this research proves that yes, this is definitely the case. AI can be a force for good. AI can help us with many difficult problems, and the future is going to look very, very fascinating. So again, this is not some research by Salesforce, because computational economics have been around, I think, for 30 years or so. But still, it's good to see new techniques from reinforcement learning can be applied in many different settings. So that was it for today. I hope you found this interesting. Let me know what you think about the applications of artificial intelligence in economics, or pretty much about the applications of artificial intelligence in any sector. I'm always very interested to hear your opinion about where AI is heading, how AI and data science are applied. And I'm very happy to answer any queries which you might have about these topics. So thank you for being here with me today, and I hope to see you again soon. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you for listening. Make sure to visit thedatascientist.com for more content about data science, AI, and blockchain.